For most of this series, every motor in the world has come from here. A handful of crudely placed machines hanging on for dear life like Spider-Man at the end of that subway train. Somehow, for a very long time, that was enough. Then I started building trains. Every locomotive, station, and freight route asked a little more from a production line that was never designed to support a world this size. Crystal oscillators are even worse. Every single oscillator used in the world has been made by hand. Not the first few, all of them. Hundreds upon hundreds of the bloody things. These temporary systems help build everything you can see, but they cannot carry the world into what comes next. For the first time, the transport infrastructure is ready. Over the next few weeks, the scattered resources of this world will begin moving towards one shared purpose. The largest production complex we have ever attempted. But before we can build the factory, we need to make the world capable of feeding it. So sit back, grab a drink. This is Satisfactory. Before we look towards the future, we need to understand how we got here. Over 600 hours, this was where the world began. A temporary collection of machines produced the first materials. Those materials built the first proper factories, and each factory allowed the world to reach a little further. Slowly, one small production line became everything you see now. The Cretian supplied the concrete. The Caldris gave us plastic, rubber and fuel. The railway connected places that once felt impossibly far apart. More recently, the roads, stations and depots have finally given those places a reason to work together. This project does not begin from nothing. It begins with everything we have already built. The new complex will permanently automate stators, motors, crystal oscillators and computers. 4 parts that have depended on temporary machines, manual crafting, and whatever happened to be sitting in storage when another project demanded them. For a long time, that was enough. But the world has grown beyond the systems that carried it here. The last time I attempted a factory like this, I completed roughly 80% of it before the save quietly joined the collection of worlds I never returned to. So this time, we are doing things differently. We're not starting with a factory and hoping its supply network catches up later. We are building everything it will depend on first. Iron, coal, caterium, quartz, plastic and rubber. 6 resources that already exist somewhere in the world, but have never reliably met in one place. The project will unfold across 3 stages. First, we reconnect plastic and rubber, prepare the local iron supply, and establish a dedicated quartz outpost. Raw quartz will leave the cave by truck, be processed beside the upper railway, then join the wider network as materials the future factory can actually use. After that, coal and caterium will complete the local supply network, allowing all 6 resources to reach the site for the first time. Only then we will begin the largest factory this world has ever seen. The first 2 resources should already be simple. The Caldris has spent months producing plastic and rubber, only to send almost everything directly into the sink. The station intended to carry them has been sitting on its foundation since the refinery was built, carefully positioned, neatly aligned, and connected to absolutely nothing. Meanwhile, the existing fuel station is already beginning to struggle with the traffic passing through it. Before we can ask the old world to support something new, parts of it will need to change. Then we can turn our attention to the quartz, which according to the scanner appears to be extremely close. Appears to be. What looks like one nearby resource connection is about to become an underground mine, a truck network, a surface processing facility, and an entirely new railway destination. All before the factory itself can even begin. Before the resources could begin moving towards the new complex, the site needed somewhere to receive them. Last episode, X3K suggested a mod called modular stations. I was skeptical at first, mostly because introducing a new railway mod while rebuilding half the network felt like an excellent way to create several problems I did not yet understand. But after snapping the first few pieces together, I began to see the potential. The station could grow around the landscape, platforms could be arranged around the routes rather than dictating them. And for the first time, the railway points actually began resembling railway points. The lower station would eventually receive the plastic and rubber from the Caldris. Higher above it, another station would handle the materials arriving from the Quartz outpost. I also left space beside the lake for a future fluid station, just in case the complex ever needs water brought in or sent somewhere else. Present Ginge thinking ahead. A deeply suspicious development. The destination was beginning to take shape. The problem was that the first two resources were still trapped inside an older part of the world. Plastic and rubber had been produced at the Caldris for months. Past Ginge had completed the difficult part, then apparently decided the rest was a problem for someone else. The fuel station was also beginning to show its age. The trains were backing up outside the platforms, partly because the route had become oversaturated, partly because the current belt still prevented the refinery from reaching its full output. The larger problem was the track itself though. Both directions narrowed into a single line before splitting towards the platforms, creating a choke point that would only become worse once plastic and rubber joined the network. Before adding anything new, the existing system needed room to breathe. Using the modular station pieces, I managed to double the fuel station's capacity inside almost exactly the same footprint. There was now slightly more spaghetti hiding underneath, but trains can alternate between two platforms rather than forming an increasingly patient queue outside one. That left the plastic and rubber station. For the first time since the Caldris was built, the materials leaving these machines would actually have somewhere useful to go. And whilst rebuilding the station, the backup of plastic and rubber brought the fuel line to a halt. I also disconnected the original station that happened to be supplying power to the entire Caldris. The station stopped, the Caldris lost power, fuel production stopped, the Voltrix ran dry. Then, in a remarkably efficient chain reaction, the entire power grid shut itself down. Say what you like about my planning, but when it fails, everything works together beautifully. I needed the Caldris running to produce fuel for the Voltrix. I needed the Voltrix running to power the Caldris. Both had now agreed to wait patiently for the other one to start. The only independent power source capable of restarting the system was the augmenter, which required computers. I had 3. 4. Eventually, the Caldris came back online. Fuel returned to the Voltrix. The rebuilt stations began operating, and for the first time, plastic and rubber were no longer being produced simply to disappear. They were moving towards the future. The next resource was already waiting beside the build site: iron. These local nodes would eventually feed a large part of the heavier production. But I did not want another collection of temporary miners scattered across the terrain while the factory grew around them. Even the extraction points needed to feel permanent. I borrowed the oil extractor surround from the Caldris, refined the measurements, and turned it into a reusable blueprint that could sit around either a miner or an extractor. The first attempt involved placing the blueprint and trying to align the miner inside it. That took 3 attempts. The better method was to place the miner first, then align the blueprint around it. A breakthrough so obvious it only took 3 failed attempts to discover. Plastic and rubber were travelling from the Caldris. Iron was waiting beside the site. Quartz, according to the scanner, was only a short distance away. The slight problem was reaching it without turning the railway into a roller coaster. Rather than forcing the line directly up the hillside, let the terrain guide its path. Every unnecessary meter gain would eventually need to be lost again. The aim was to preserve the height we already had, follow the natural contours, then climb only when the landscape gave us a reason to. It made the route longer, but it also made it feel like a railway that belonged. The terrain made the next decision for me too. At the top of the formation was one of the natural openings between the surrounding cliffs. It was almost perfectly positioned for the Quartz station, which meant the station did not really have several possible locations, it had one. And for a brief moment, the route was solved. Then I noticed 2 geysers directly underneath it. Whether I eventually used them or not, I could not leave water firing straight through the railway every few minutes. Although with enough landscaping, they may yet become quite an impressive feature. For now, the route needed adjusting again. Happy with the progress on the viaduct, I took a step back to admire it. That's when I realised the entire thing was half a metre out of line. Shit. Oh, God. Somewhere near the beginning, one small alignment error had repeated itself through every section I placed. The limited concrete supply was now arranged very neatly, half a metre away from where it needed to be. Once the alignment was corrected, progress became entirely dependent on concrete. Whenever enough appeared in storage, I placed another section of viaduct. Mostly, I just stood in the middle of the site trying to imagine how all of this would eventually come together. The railway was beginning to divide the landscape into different districts. The lower basin felt right for the heavier production. The upper cliffs were beginning to define the technology side. I could see the individual pieces, and I was reasonably confident they belonged to the same puzzle. Eventually I got bored of waiting for concrete and went back to the Creation. The factory from episode 3 was still sending most of its supply towards steel production, while dimensional storage received whatever remained. That arrangement had worked for hundreds of hours. It was not particularly helpful while an unfinished railway waited across the valley, so I reversed the priority. Dimensional storage would receive the main concrete supply, while steel production would only receive the overflow once storage was full. I'm sure diverting its main supply away from steel would not return later with any consequences whatsoever. The railway now had a destination. The Quartz did not, because the resource that appeared to be sitting beside the new station was actually buried beneath it. Inside the cave were 2 pure quartz nodes and 1 normal. Enough raw quartz to supply both quartz crystals and silica in the future. Extracting it would be simple, getting it out would not. I could have ran belts from every miner, carried them through the cave and eventually found somewhere to bring them outside. It would have worked, but it would have also reduced the whole cave to another hidden logistics corridor. Instead, I wanted the mine to feel like its own operation. Once the stations were in, I added ceiling lights. Somehow, after more than 600 hours in this world, I had never used them before. a quick adjustment to the lighting control panel, and oh baby. A few moments earlier, this had been a dark hole containing a temporary machine. Now it felt like the beginning of a real underground mining facility. The lights revealed the scale of the cavern, picked out the rock formations, and gave the truck route an atmosphere I had not expected. Back outside, the next question was where the trucks would unload. My first attempt used the nearest available patch of land beside the cave entrance. The station's fitted, technically, which is usually how the worst layouts begin. Moving the unloading area further away allowed the road to follow a much more natural route through the terrain. Rather than forcing the trucks directly up the hillside, the road could climb gradually towards the height of the railway. The journey became slightly longer, but the vehicles gained a believable approach. I finished the morning by placing the first proper production machinery, 18 refineries for the pure crystal recipe. And after several days dominated by railways, concrete shortages, cave logistics and route planning, the project was finally beginning to resemble a factory. It still needed raw quartz, still needed water. The trucks had not moved a single item, but the shape of the operation was there. And that was about it for the Sunday morning. My best mate Professor Smash had a rare day free, so every other plan disappeared and we jumped onto Rust instead. It took me back to the lockdown days, waking up, opening a few beers, and spending the entire day playing the forest in VR. No schedule, nothing productive, just two mates disappearing into another world and causing problems for anyone unfortunate enough to get nearby. Great times. He has supported me in this channel from the beginning. He pushed me to start making videos on the days when I wanted to stop. One of the only people reminding me to carry on. Now I'm trying to return the favour. He's wanted to start his own channel for a long time, although finding the time around work, children, and everything else is not simple. The plan is for the two of us to play Rust, Winrose, Repo, and basically anything that gives us the opportunity to get up to mischief. His channel does not have a single video yet, but perhaps seeing a few people waiting there might give him the same little push he once gave me. So it would generally mean the world if you went over and subscribed. The link is below. The next day began with establishing the first train routes, or at least it should have. None of the new stations had power, and none of them were appearing on the rail network. After a little troubleshooting, I found the problem. The Viaduct PCs had not been connected properly, so I placed them again for the third time.
This is the worst!
The stations finally came online, and for the first time the route could begin. A small fuel train would supply the quartz mine with its own diesel for the trucks. It solved the immediate problem neatly. It also added another demand to a fuel network that had already caused enough trouble during this project. Every new route asked slightly more from the Caldris. Something else to keep an eye on. I watched the train leave, then headed over to the very temporary and extremely bumpy slope section of the railway to wait for it. And I waited and waited. Something was wrong. The train had derailed. Somebody had left a test train parked on the track. Once the obstacle I personally created was removed, the fuel route began working as intended. The mine now had a reliable supply for its trucks, assuming the wider fuel network continued to tolerate it. The Quartz had miners, it had loading stations, it had a truck route, it had refineries and a fuel supply. What it did not yet have was finished logistics, a completed building, or any real identity beyond the machines. The PCs were finally in place. Now they needed to become one operation, and more importantly, one place. Quartz crystal production was finally ready. The normal node could still be used for silica. Eventually it will be, but the future complex does not need that supply quite yet.
Lass, you are the weakest link. Goodbye.
I could spend another day building machinery for a problem that has not yet arrived, or I could admit that I am far too excited about moving on with the wider project. For once, I decided that not every future problem needed solving today. The node is ready, the space is waiting. When the world needs silica, we will return and build it properly. For now, the quartz crystal operation had achieved what this stage required. The difficult engineering decisions were finished. What remained was the quiet work. A factory becomes functional when the machines begin moving. A place becomes believable through everything that happens afterwards. The supports beneath the platforms, the paths between the buildings, lights guiding the trucks home, trees growing around the edges, signs, barriers and all the smaller details that suggest this operation existed before we arrived. None of them change the production numbers, but together they change how the place feels. This is the part of the build I enjoy the most. The pressure begins to disappear. The calculations are finished. There is no longer one correct answer, just hundreds of small choices, slowly turning infrastructure into somewhere that belongs in the world. This work rarely produces one enormous transformation. A tree here, a light there. One support shifted half a metre because the first one looked wrong. Individually, none of it feels particularly important. Together, it's the difference between a collection of machines and somewhere that feels alive. Several days ago, this was a dark cave. Plastic and rubber were disappearing into the sink. Iron existed beside the site, but had no permanent role in what came next. Quartz appeared nearby, while hiding an entire mining operation beneath the world. Now plastic and rubber are travelling from the Caldris. Iron is ready beside the future complex. Raw quartz moves through the cave. The truck carries it towards the surface. The unloading station feeds the processing line. The refineries turn it into something the wider world can use. And for the first time, Quartz leaves this outpost as part of a permanent supply network. One of the resources that held this world back for months was finally moving. Not because of one machine, because an underground mine, a truck network, a fuel route, a processing facility and a railway had finally learned to work together. The factory itself still does not exist, but the world around it has begun to change. Older factories are supplying new infrastructure. Railways built across the series are carrying materials towards one destination. Small decisions made hundreds of hours ago are beginning to support something none of them could have achieved alone. This is only the first stage. Coal and Caterium still need their own routes. The final supply network still needs testing. And beyond all of it, the largest factory this world has ever attempted is waiting on an empty piece of land. But for the first time, that factory no longer feels impossible. It feels inevitable. If you enjoy watching this first stage come together, subscribe so you do not miss the next part. Leaving a like, a comment or sharing the video genuinely helps more than you might think. The full day-by-day build journals for this project are also available free on Patreon, including the mistakes, decisions and smaller moments that never make the final edit. And if you'd like to have a look around this world or use any of the blueprints you've seen in the video, you can find all of that over on the Patreon as well. And as always, thank you so much to all the guys already supporting over there. And Professor Smash's channel is linked below. A few subscribers waiting for him might be exactly the push he needs to finally press record. Thank you as always for watching and for continuing to support this world. I really can't wait to see you in the next one. Ginge out.